It's not easy mode so much as it is equality mode. It's if you need one box to stand on, and I'm shorter than you, then I should need 3 boxes, and it puts us at the same place. It's not about I get 3 boxes and you only get 1. It's about that I need to stand on 3 boxes where you stand on 1 because you're a taller person. But we both can now see over the fence to watch the game together. Like that's the idea of easy mode. Is it's not to make things easier, and it's unfortunate that easy is the term that whoever came up with hard mode and easy mode really did a disservice to really video games and all of our people in general, because now there's this faction of gamers who really tie their identity to beating a game on hard mode. And of course the antithesis of hard is easy. So if you say, oh well, I beat the game on easy, they go, I beat it on hard mode, so I'm a better human than you. And this is what they hang their personality on. And so it makes it almost impossible to have a conversation with them where you're going, well, that's great, but not everybody with a disability can beat it on that mode. Like, it's literally impossible due to their reaction time, their stamina, the amount of movement in their arm. They just can't do it.
This episode's guest on Disrupting Innovation is none other than Steve Spohn. He is the Senior Director of Development for the AbleGamers charity. It is his mission to create a world where folks with disabilities have access to gaming environments no matter the level of their disability. So he's trying to create gaming equity for all amongst the disability community, and he and AbleGamers view this as a hugely important task for fighting social isolation and helping people to connect. I really wanted to introduce the world to Steve simply because the work that he does is so important and so necessary, and he's had a lot of time to think about how charities like AbleGamers can make a big difference to the lives of people living with disability everywhere in this world. And really, AbleGamers has completely disrupted a space by creating a really simple and elegant solution to networks of folks with disabilities all over the country and all over the planet who were sort of sitting on their own, not interacting with one another, and not having that loneliness or social isolation viewed as the medical emergency that it is. And AbleGamers came in and has started to connect the dots and make a real difference in the lives of thousands and thousands of people. Steve, as a person living with a disability himself, has an intense amount of wisdom to share on, not only the mission of what he does every day, but also just the need to create more access in the world of disability to allow individuals with disabilities to be included in every single level of society. And, I think that what people will get out of this episode is just a renewed appreciation for how the more access you give and the more inclusion you create, the greater it benefits society in general. So it's not just about creating inclusion for people with disabilities. It's about creating inclusion that benefits the entirety of society. Because every time you silence a portion of the population, every single time that you work to silence a portion of the population by not being inclusive, all of society misses out. And Steve has just been such a champion. The episode itself is full of incredible quotes, and I think that one of the things that hit me like a bolt out of the blue from Steve was really to hear him put a very fine point on this idea that many times we don't really want disability to exist. We either want to cure it or we want to imagine that it doesn't exist at all, as opposed to making every effort to just allow folks with disability to live in the same world as us. And I think being self-effacing about that, coming to terms with the fact that that is, something that we need to work on as a society, is just one more pathway to disruptive innovation. So I'm excited for everyone to hear this episode.
This is Disrupting Innovation with Dr. David Putrino.
So, Steve, welcome to our podcast. It's called the Disrupting Innovation Podcast, and we're really focusing on this idea that to get an idea from bench to bedside in healthcare, so get an idea from like conception of the idea to it's actually doing good for people in the healthcare system, on average takes 17 years. We always want to point out that that's a dumb number. It's a number that shouldn't exist. It's a number that should be much smaller. And so the point of the podcast is to talk to all sorts of different people about why does it take so long to do good work? Why does it take so long to change attitudes, change care paradigms, so on and so forth? So we talk to scientists, we talk to media people, we talk to people with disabilities, we talk to people who work for not-for-profit organizations and industry and everything else. And
I'm at least 4 of those things. So
you're at least 4 of those things. So
I'm working on that disability thing. One of those days, I'm gonna get one of those.
Good. We're off to a good start. I like it. I like to, in the first 5 minutes at least, insult at least 2 out of the 3 sick people who are listening to this whole thing.
All 2 of those people, both of our moms. All right. Editor, make sure you keep that in. Anyway, so
I love to start by just
go?
telling. I want to know about you. I want people to hear about who you are and what you do to start.
Yes. Well, it was a rainy Thursday. It was cold. It was in the afternoon or nighttime. I don't remember. Well, my name's Steve Spohn. I am the Senior Director of Partnerships and Development at AbleGamers. But basically, I run around sort of COOing, doing all the daily ops for a charity that helps people with disabilities be enabled by assistive technology. We have a peer counseling department that basically brings people who have disabilities into the virtual front door and listens to all of the challenges that they may have to get to video games. And then we pair up the technology that would help them get from the barriers that they're facing to the goals that they want to reach.
Amazing. And I'm pretty sure that, along the way to achieving that goal, there's a lot of community building and social connection and really wonderful things beyond just getting to play video games, which is also a wonderful thing for most people.
Yeah, well, AbleGamers actually has multiple pillars. Peer counseling just being the one that we talk about the most on podcasts like this. We have an engineering department. A lot of people don't want to hear about the everyday grinding, literally, that you do in the engineering department to come up with these controllers and to solder and sand your way to getting perfection in 3D modeling. But the engineering team does a fantastic job. Our professional development does an amazing job of reaching out to game developers and figure out how to bring the knowledge that we have of working in the disability world to explain the barriers that people with disabilities face to game developers. Something that we discovered very early on in AbleGamers was that there were definitely people who were jerks who just didn't want people with disabilities to play their games or didn't see the value in people with disabilities. But those people are far and few between, whereas the majority of people just don't understand. They don't have someone with a disability in their life. They don't understand the differences, and they don't understand the base similarities either. Anybody who is not disabled themselves but has, fallen in love with someone who is disabled, or has a best friend, or has a family member who is disabled, you have a purview into the disability community that most able-bodied people do not. Whereas there's a lot of people who just don't even know that you shouldn't, say the C word, or don't even know what C word I'm talking about. And there's a lot of those kind of non-safe areas that our professional development team provides for developers and for people who are just looking to become practitioners in a course that AbleGamers teaches to certify that you do know what you're talking about when it comes to developing things with an accessibility mindset. So there's a lot of things that AbleGamers does. It's impossible to put it into an elevator pitch, unfortunately, other than we do good stuff for the disability community. But part of being a part of an organization that is so lofty as AbleGamers is sort of realizing 17 and a half years ago now that there were just such basic needs in the disability community that we really just needed champions to be out there fighting for more accessibility. And, slowly but surely, we've been paving the way for more and more of those people to get a foot into the mountain and start climbing.
Oh, absolutely. And, I this point on accessibility is so important and so overlooked. I mean, I wish that to your point of there's only a small subset of folks that are complete jerks, I think, that are just like, why do we need accessibility? This works for me just fine. And then, there are folks that just don't have awareness. But sometimes I just, I wish people could see, just the level of innovation and idea generation, and if we're going to be gross and talk about money, even just dollar generation that actually working toward creating adaptive experiences and creating with universal design involved actually creates, just the idea that like things as simple as curb cuts, which were created because of the ADA. And now if you're a mum in Brooklyn pushing your stroller, or a dad pushing your stroller down the street, you get pissed off if there's not a curb cut for you to, push your baby down rather than have to sort of bump and wake them up. But that wouldn't exist without the disability community. I wish we could just get through people's skulls that accessibility makes things better for everybody. It's not just, oh, we're just doing this because of the disabled community. No, dum-dum. This is making things better for everyone, across the board, because, everybody my age watches Netflix with subtitles now. Because, of course you do. But if we didn't have the deaf community, we wouldn't have subtitles, but it creates an enhanced experience for everybody. And if you're not doing it for them, at least do it for you. I wish we could just sort of get that across, because sometimes that's the only way to wake people up to the needs.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned the curb cut, because the actual act of doing that is called the curb cut effect. And for those of you listening that don't understand what David's talking about here, he's actually talking about a phenomenon in design that they literally have named the curb cut effect, where the ADA stated that you have to have a certain angle cut into the corner of cement sidewalks per so many city blocks. You have to have a ramp on each corner available within so many feet, and that's a state law that has gone, now the ADA, it's nationwide. And they call it the curb cut effect because what happened was that people who are delivering food off of a FedEx truck decided that they also like going up the ramps. They don't have to jump it up over the curb. They found that, hot dog vendors in New York City don't have to shove the cart up over the cart. They can use the ramp. Baby strollers can go up them, just like David was saying about, the dad walking the stroller. These are all things that help the able-bodied community. That was originally intended as an accessible feature for disabled people. The golden standard of design is to make things easier for everyone, not just people with disabilities. It is the founding principle for why there is a faction within the disability community that believes that the disability community itself is far less disabled than we think we are, because it's more of the world was not designed to take those things into account, because, well, you could just step up over it. Is it inconvenient? Yeah. But oh well, we'll just lug this, giant 500-pound package parcel up over the curb and will break my back a little bit. But why would we cut a diagonal slope into it in order to make it easier for the guy delivering packages, right? Well, if you have people in a wheelchair who are demanding that you do it, well then the other guy gets something out of it too. And so it really took a while. I didn't realize this was such an unknown fact that David just brought up until I was on a fairly popular podcast where I kept
This one,
getting
right?
people.
That,
This one
that-
right now, yes.
yeah.
That in the future, yeah. That basically kept tweeting at me, going, "Oh, I just learned about the curb cut effect from Steve Spohn on the Besties podcast, and it was amazing. Like, you get one or two comments when you go on a podcast. That's pretty normal, but like." This was like 1 to 2 comments per day for a while, and still it's been 9 months since I've been on the podcast, and I still get at least one a week. And it's because people don't realize that some of the things, like Dave mentioned, the curb cut effect apply to. So curbs, the closed captioning on televisions, eyeglasses. There's a lot of things that able-bodied people just take for granted as it makes life a little bit easier that was originally supposed to help people who are disabled and now helps everybody. So, there's an interesting side tale to that. I was early on in AbleGamers history. We were giving away awards for game design, and one of the games that we gave was Star Wars: The Old Republic. It's a great game. It's an MMO online. If you've never played it, you get to be a lightsaber wielding badass who runs around and saves the universe. Typical game or day for David. But you go through the universe and do your thing, right? And it's got really good features. It's got things like you can push one button to loot all the bodies around you instead of individually looting. It's got the ability to auto run and to complete quests without having to click multiple buttons. You click one button, and it was just designed very well, and it made things easy back when not a lot of MMOs were doing that. And we reached out to the company. We had a panel at PAX East. This was back in 2016, I want to say. And we brought on one of the lead designers, and we kind of ambushed them with this award, being like, hey, you won the award. We just wanted to give it to you, say thank you for designing such an accessible game. And the guy absolutely pushed back against me, going, oh, we didn't design this for disabled people. We were just trying to make the best design that we could to help out and make the game as enjoyable as possible. And he pushed back on the wrong person, because my immediate off the cuff was, well, yeah, good game design is accessible game design. So congratulations on designing an accessible game for disabled people. And he was super mad because I just outed his game as being good for disabled people, which at the time, designers didn't want that to be a thing, because if your game was tagged as good for disabled people, then it has some sort of invisible stigma of, well, then it's just not for everybody else. It must only be for disabled people. So people who were responsible for moving product, which he was, didn't want anything to do with it. And so we did not get along after that panel. He was not appreciative of me calling him out like that in the middle of 1,000 people. But that kind of golden design applies in so many different fields that people don't even realize that when you're designing for accessibility, you're actually just designing something good for everyone.
Yeah, good for everyone, easy to use, enjoyable to use, pleasant to use. I mean, I see you doing a lot of advocacy also for just games having an easy mode, right? Because that's just one way that you can make something for everyone much more easily.
Equality mode is what I really like to talk about in easy mode. The thing, easy mode is one of those things that even I and AbleGamers don't agree with. AbleGamers proper doesn't advocate for an easy mode. They advocate for learning the barriers and challenges and eliminating the barriers and having ways of getting around those challenges instead of just eliminating them entirely. Whereas I try to speak to the masses, and the masses understand the concept of easy mode. And I wrote an article not long ago for digital trends, it's not easy mode so much as it is equality mode. It's if you need one box to stand on and I'm shorter than you, then I should need three boxes, and it puts us at the same place. It's not about I get three boxes and you only get one. It's about that I need to stand on three boxes where you stand on one because you're a taller person. But we both can now see over the fence to watch the game together. Like that's the idea of easy mode. Is it's not to make things easier, and it's unfortunate that easy is the term that whoever came up with hard mode and easy mode really did a disservice to really video games and all of our people in general, because now there is this uh, faction of gamers who really tie their identity to beating a game on hard mode. And of course, the antithesis of hard is easy. So if you say, "Oh, well, I beat the game on easy," they go, "Ah, I beat it on hard mode, so I'm a better human than you." And this is what they hang their personality on. And so it makes it almost impossible to have a conversation with them where you're going, "Well, that's great, but not everybody with a disability can beat it on that mode." Like, it's literally impossible due to their reaction time, their stamina, the amount of movement in their arm. They just can't do it. It's not a skill. It's not learning. You can sit there with a master instructor for 10 years, and because your body won't listen, I'm still never going to be able to tap dance. It doesn't matter if you get, the world's greatest tap dancer, which I can't name drop because I don't know who it is, to come and teach me. I'm guessing it's Ryan Reynolds. I don't know. I can't get them to teach me how to tap dance. My legs don't work. They're not going to work. So it's one of those things where I wish that we could have an honest conversation about those kind of things, and we could relate to one another that your glass ceiling is not the same as mine, and we need to be respectful of the fact that in order for us to both reach our full potentials, we may have different paths to go up the same mountain.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That's these are perspectives that I think everyone just needs to get familiar with and comfortable with, and there's not enough good, open, and transparent discourse about this out there. Everyone wants to turn it into a thing, right? It's it can be exhausting sometimes.
It is. There's a lot of advocates who burned out over that, and I see it all the time, and it's unfortunate. It's called the crab pot problem. It's something that is known in the disability community particularly, but it's in all minority groups. It's when you feel like the seats at the table are limited, then those of us who are in the community who have aspirations of having our voices heard begin to undercut and snap at one another. It's called the crab pot problem because if you're a crab fisherman, they don't put a lid on the boat where the crabs are. They throw the crabs into a deep hole, and then they can't get out because every time a crab almost makes it out, another crab will reach forward to pull itself out, and instead of pulling itself out, pulls the other crab back in. So it's called the crab pot problem because it's what minorities do to each other a lot. And you'll see this when, for example, the easy mode thing, when one gamer who wants to make a name for themselves starts going, "Well, I don't need an easy mode because I'm amazing and I can do everything an able-bodied person does," because their personality, their psychology is that rather than dealing with their disability, they have decided to fight against it. And to them, becoming a quote whole person is to just deny that the disability exists and put themselves on the same level as everyone else. And that's the way that they have chosen to deal with their disability. And that is, something that they have to deal with, and their therapist has to deal with. That's not something that I or anyone else can really help with. But it hurts. It hurts the rest of the community because then there's people who say, "Well, that's great. I'm glad you can do it, buddy. But my disability is different. No two disabilities even in the same category. Those of you who are doctors know this. You can diagnose two patients with the same thing. Doesn't mean they have the same abilities because we're all in different trajectories. Prognosis is diagnosis. And in that situation, it's unfortunate because you have these advocates who are out in it for themselves, and that's kind of their shtick, is to just be like, "I'm as good as any able-bodied person." And and I congratulate people for having that kind of confidence, and that is good, especially in a world that loves to knock your self confidence down if you're disabled. But it can be a harmful narrative to the overall cause. So there's just some things about advocacy that are kind of rough. There's infighting and spotlight, grabbing, and it's not an easy job. It's also a thankless job. I'm sure you would have no idea about that whatsoever. When you advocate for stuff, you're often ignored, and in best case scenario, in the worst case scenario, people yell at you for doing your job, and the better you do your job, the more you get yelled at. So advocacy is one of those jobs. Nobody, I've said this a million times, nobody at 6 years old wakes up and goes, "Mommy, I want to be an advocate." Like, no, nobody says that. There's not one kid in the world who's done that. You just kind of fall into it because you realize that there's something in the world that's hurting, that's wrong, and you want to help heal it, and you're willing to take on that fight yourself. So you end up being an advocate, and you do what you can until eventually the world burns you out.
Absolutely, and well said. Well said, especially in 6-year-old Steve voice. Let's do the rest of the podcast in that voice.
Oh God, I don't have you don't pay me
No,
enough for that.
there's too much of a commitment. But I'm glad you brought up the crab pot problem, because I think that, like I said, we on this podcast we talk to all sorts of people, and we're like, what is the biggest, like, what's stopping the progress? And often I feel like in the not-for-profit sector, the crab pot problem is what's stopping the progress. Like, there is so much more that groups could do if they were banding together. And just saying, you know what, let's not be resource scarce monsters that are, like, worried about what's next. And so therefore, it's a zero-sum game. If Steve gets this celebrity to do his thing, that means we can't get him, and therefore we need to beat Steve to the punch. Like, is it, from the outside looking in, that seems to be a big rate limiting factor for a lot of not-for-profits, that they're not working together.
Yeah, it's unfortunate in that there are some bad actors out there in the disability community, and I've seen it in other communities. I'm currently seeing it, in the debate in the trans community about one of the popular games that's coming out now, where people on one side of the trans community are saying it's fine to play it, on the other side they're saying it's not, and there's this internal war of who's right and who's wrong, and a lot of it can be assuaged if the secular world would just get together and give more people a voice at the table, and then people who are in the disability community, the trans community, the gay community, would all the minorities. Well, any minority that I could name right now should have as many voices at the table as the average human, right? We have a lot of my one friend always called it the stale, pale, and male communities. Where a lot of the good old boys like to keep minorities out, whether that's because of race, color, gender, sexual orientation. I see it all the time in the disability community where it's not that people don't necessarily like each other. Sure, there's the normal, so and so is jealous because, you happen to land this cool thing. And man, I wish I had landed that cool thing, and they don't quite emotionally know how to deal with that. And that's hard. That's some personal growth that person has to go through. But more often than not, I really blame the system. And, we need people who can change the system. And I think there's some stages of that. I think that people like you and me, David, I think that we are the system now. We are part of the system, and we change the system by changing it from within. And there are people younger than us that don't have that power yet, and they're vying for that power. And I hope that when they get to our levels, that they also will become part of the system and help infect change. And that's sort of the goal. That's why I go on podcasts like this, and hoping to reach at least a few people that hear this, and they get inspired, and they go, I'm going to fight the ladder, and I'm going to climb high enough that I can at least move the wheel a little bit before my time is done to make change. I saw it on a TV show not long ago, and it was typical Hollywood, badass comes in from out of town and takes over the lead job at a hospital and starts doing all these changes that no one ever would imagine saying yes to, and he's just like, sure, we'll do it, do that too, let's do it. And his explanation for why he's saying yes to everything is, let's just try things. We are the system now. Everyone blames the system, so let's be the system and let's change. And I really have thought, what a great lesson in that. And so I've been trying to adopt that myself and saying, yes, I am the system now. And that is why some people don't like me, is I am the system, and that's fine. I'm going to accept that role, and I'm going to try to change what I can from within. And sometimes that's going to get me in trouble, and I'm just going to have to be okay with that, because, if I'm not going to change the system, then I can't expect anyone else to either.
Mic drop. Steve, the system Spohn. I'm here for it. No, I couldn't agree more. And and I think that to that point, I mean, one of the things that happens in academia all the time, to the point of how broken the system is and how skewed it is against giving people voices. We have this in academia, it's starting to gain a lot of momentum that you don't want to have a panel that's all white men sitting on the panel. They call it a manel. Yes. It's not just academia. This happens at other like trade shows and things like that. But one of the things that I was that I'm always really conscious of is the way that academia is set up is you go to a conference, right? And if you get asked to speak at a conference, if you're lucky, they'll say, you know what, we'll reimburse you for all of your costs, right? But still, they reimburse you after the fact. So you got to buy your ticket, you got to book your hotel room, you got to, do all the things associated. You need to get childcare if you're a parent. You need to, and then because academia is academia, they'll take you about 90 days to reimburse you for your conference costs. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to a conference, it's like you got to be in a position to be out like $3,000 for 2 or 3 months until someone reimburses you.
Yeah.
And what we know just be a fact of social science is that the further you deviate from being a white, cisgender male, the more likely you are to not be able to afford to front that $2,000 or $3,000 up front. Yeah. And so you ask people to be a part of your panel who are people of color, who are women, and they're more likely to say no to you than a white man, and they're less likely to tell you the actual reason. And so because no one wants to admit, well, I can't really front this money to show up to this thing. It would be much better if we could all admit that to one another and be like, you know what, I'm saying no because I don't want to wait 90 days for my tight-ass institution to reimburse me for
I can't obviously speak to not being a white male. That's for a better guest to speak about than me. But I will say the one thing I can't comment on there is I've seen a movement in really the world recently. I've seen particularly in Twitch streaming, which is something I do on the side of AbleGamers, and in our industry in general, as advocacy is. People are starting to talk up about rates. People are starting to say, I got paid this amount to do this, and I got this in order to do this. And it used to be a big secret. And it was like, unless you were in a union, you never talked about how much money you got, because for some reason in America, particularly, we made it taboo to talk about how much money you're getting, as if it's like two things you don't talk about at the dinner table is religion and how much money you make. Like that's, but we're starting to learn now that was a thing that was instilled upon us from capitalism. That was the people at the top training us not to talk about how much money they had to give you to get to work. Because if you told, if I'm earning $1,000 an hour and you're only earning $50 an hour, and I tell you that we're doing the same job, hey buddy, I'm earning 1,000, and you're like, well, what the heck? I'm earning 50. You're gonna go to them and be like, pay up, or else I'm out. And then they're out money. And so they don't want us to talk to each other. They don't want us to compare notes. And so that, I hope that, it happens in academia. I hope that it continues to be a thing. I hope that as people get talks, I hope that it's something that happens. And my friend Alana Pierce. She's pretty famous in the video game world. She's an okay Australian who's who does a lot of cool things for the world. She's my co-host for the Accessibility Awards. And one of the things that she did was she basically has foregoed having her own salary for, say, a hosting gig or for some kind of event, and told the production staff, like, no, give this to the minority that you hired to do the hosting gig, or give this to another creator, because she is the person who seems to get a lot of gigs, and she's trying to help share that spotlight and help share the burden. If the production company's not going to pay, then she'll step up and she'll do it. And I don't think it's right. I don't think that she should have to forego her salary for doing a job. But at the same time, I do think that there is a certain rallying cry to that. A certain, if we would all, just those of us who are lucky and who do have the spotlight, would once in a while forego the paycheck, even if we don't have to say, hey, you should do this, and then we talk about it, then it makes it easier for other people to do the same thing.
Absolutely. Just podcast full of Australians doing incredible things. I mean, yeah. Thanks for really sticking to the rider where you had to mention at least one good Australian.
It's my podcast rule is every time you have to talk about one Australian. It's just a rule. I never make the rules. I just follow them.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it. So no, but I mean, I think that, this is so important. I mean, I think we need to all find different ways to be subversive of these rules that marginalize voices, that make accessibility and make diversity and inclusion and access less likely. And really often it really is all about sort of trying to take a moment and look around your environment and see what's messed up, whether it be something as simple as taking that moment to be like, hey, someone needs to, there's a lot of financial support necessary to go and speak at this conference. And maybe that's why X number of people are saying no to me, politely declining my invitation. And rather than throwing my hands up in the air and saying, well, I tried to get a woman on this panel or a person of color, and they just didn't want to do it, actually examining the reasons why. And I mean, cost is one reason. And then, obviously there's a million other reasons why people might say no. But if we're not being very self-effacing about why we're not, really delving deep into these things and getting after it, we're not going to see change.
No, we're not. And, because it's only our moms listening. The dark truth of it is that nobody likes to talk about is that there is, I don't want to throw shade at the hardworking event coordinators out there who are actually trying, but the majority of event coordinators are under extreme pressure from the top of wherever they're under to make these events happen at the cheapest price point possible. And unfortunately, one of the things that we're learning, again, through sharing information with each other, is that if you are a minority, the value of just giving you a voice is considered an offset of cost. It is literally where it is, or at least at one time was, so rare for a disabled person, a black person, a gay person, even probably back far enough, a woman, to be invited to a thing that they went, well, nobody else lets you on these panels, so let's face it, do we really need to pay you? No. We're being nice enough to let you on the panel, so do we really need to pay you to be there? Yeah.
Do it for the exposure.
Exposure, yeah. Yes. My mortgage company still does not accept exposure. It's very weird.
I know.
So it's unfortunate, but again, a systemic problem, a problem that I hope gets changed from within as more people like us and our listeners get into seats of power where they can change things. When we did the accessibility awards, all the disabled people that we brought on were paid either in funding and monetary donation or to whatever they wanted to if they weren't allowed to, according to SSI standards, take money, gift cards, a donation to a charity, a piece of equipment that they needed, whatever it was that we had to do to give them some kind of compensation for doing work. And if more places would do that, you and I work with Logitech, and that's one of the things Logitech is really good about is, they recognized early on, mostly thanks to you and me telling them, that not everybody can take cash, and that's because our insurance system is set up to be like, oh, you got $20, I guess you don't need this insulin now. Like, that's
Yeah.
not how that works, but yeah, sure, right. So you have to be mindful of stuff like that. But just because you're in that paradox, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't be compensated. So I like to think that, and again, another way that we can change, and I mean all of us listening to this podcast, the way that we can change is when you have an opportunity to insist that someone who is, of a minority and is sitting at a seat at the table, don't let the company just be like, yeah, your payment is that I'm listening to you. No, that's not payment. Payment is cash. You know what I mean? Help me pay my rent for this month. That's payment.
Absolutely. And I think that one of the most skewed pieces of advice that people are given when they're trying to learn how to be more successful in their life is that they should get themselves a mentor. And we almost exclusively tell people that your mentor should be some wise person at the top of the mountain who tells you what to do. Well, the wisest person I know, which is of course my wife Rose, who you've met.
Yep.
She's like, no, get yourself a mentor that's younger than you. Get a mentor that's older than you, but also get a mentor that's younger than you, because you can start to see both. If you accept mentorship from both sides of the spectrum, that's when you start to see the disconnects. That's when you start to see the holes where you can say, oh my God, this is what you're going through. Hey, screw you, older mentor.
Yep.
Look at all the stuff you're breaking for the next generation. And I think it's just a really, the whole, as you mentioned earlier, the whole system is set up to maintain the status quo. Even right down to the point of like, how do you learn to be successful? Ask someone older than you. And it's like,
well, sometimes it's just like being reminded of the struggles that you already went through. Like you brought up about, having to front the cost to go be a speaker at an academic event. Like, there's been several times that I've done events where it was thousands of dollars out of pocket, and they're like, yeah, we have a net 90. And for those of you who aren't in those kind of worlds, means that they have 90 days to pay you whatever you paid out. And some people can't float $10,000 for 90 days. Some of us don't have that ability because we're disabled and the government won't let us hold that much money at one time, or you don't have credit cards, or, whatever it is. You just don't have the ability to maneuver those kind of numbers around. And I've had to fight a couple of times where, I had nurses that needed to be paid, their fee for being a nurse. And the companies are like, oh, yeah, we'll get to them. It's like, but they live paycheck to paycheck. Like, you can't, I understand you think nurses make billions of dollars. Guess what? They don't. So, pay them so that they can pay their water bill. They're not out there like, man, I need my cocaine money. They're like, I'd like to pay the rent this month. So, like that's, and that's one of the things I think you kind of have people who have forgotten, because now they're at the top and they're like, I've got 20 million in the bank. Who cares? I could float at 10,000. Who cares? It's like, well, not everybody does.
When I was a postdoc at NYU, we won't discuss how long ago that was, but
but there were pterodactyls in the sky at the time.
There was yes. The chickens were lizards, and it was a whole scene. But basically, I was earning next to nothing because that's what postdocs earn, and every day was paycheck to paycheck. Every day was like, okay, I paid rent. Now I'm going to live on 2-minute noodles for the rest of the month.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember giving a lecture. Basically, one of the high-level professors at the institution wasn't able to give a lecture, and so I subbed in for him. So it was like a very prestigious lecture that I was giving, and I was a very low-level employee. And then at the end of it, they paid me like this $1,200 honorarium for giving the lecture.
Hmm.
And the professor handed it to me, and he said, "Yeah, take your girlfriend out for a nice dinner." And I was like, dude, it's $12. I'm going to like live off this for 3 months. Are you kidding me? Take one dinner? Like,
Yeah, right?
is this how divorced from reality you are? But it
Yep,
was, you know,
it
he was like, here's
yeah.
some play money, $1,200. And I was
Yeah.
like,
No, this is real.
you have no
Yeah.
idea. Like,
And the sad thing is, most people who have that age, except for the silver spoon nepo babies,
of course.
they may be born into it, but for most of us, at one time we worked through that, and it's it's true what the psychologists say is you will forget more in this lifetime than you'll ever learn because the brain doesn't let you hold everything that you learn unless you're a very certain personality that can hold that kind of information. Most of us, can't remember what we had for lunch 3 weeks ago, and it's because it's not important information. Same thing with like if you don't have to worry about where your next meal is coming from, you may easily forget to be appreciative of the fact that I know that I can order a pizza any day of the week now. That's the place in life I'm at right now. Is I always have pizza money, and I try to remember that in my life that there was a time where I didn't have milk money, let alone for a pizza. And it's a privilege and not to take it for granted.
Totally agree. And yeah, I mean, I sort of ruminate on that as well. This like and weirdly also around food, where I'm like, do I really need to be
It's dinner
buying
time when
more?
we're recording this. David and I are both very hungry. Oh,
Yeah, I guess so. But yeah, I'm like, do I need to be buying my lunch every day at like at the hospital?
yeah,
Because I remember being a postdoc and being a
yeah,
graduate student and being like, that's just not an option. This $7
yeah.
a day, what a frivolous expense to spend on food. Like again, the 2-minute noodles. Bring a pack
Yeah.
of that from home, and that's got you covered. And you've got to remember that, because you've got to be able to sort of understand where people are coming from. There's no
hmm
shame in not being in that stage anymore. But also, I think you need to, well, I mean, if you're not taking that moment to reflect on the fact that you should be helping people
Yes.
not have to go through that,
hmm
or because that's not a great place to be.
No.
Everyone should be able to go and buy their lunch like that. That should be something that you should be able to do.
That
Like,
random act of kindness. I mean,
not yeah,
yeah,
not
yeah,
or
yeah.
a lucky break.
Absolutely. I mean, so the other day, so for those of you who know who I am, know that I can be both a very kind but an aggressively defending person when I have to be when I find something's going wrong. And
I love
so,
watching Steve blow people up on
yep,
Twitter.
it
It's my
happens every
favorite
now and again.
sport.
Someone trips the anger side of me. But it's always in defense mode. I don't believe in attacking, but I will defend fiercely. And that happened to me not too long ago when someone who I know was publicly talking about how they were almost in tears because they were at the supermarket and the person in front of them was paying with credit card, and they asked for cash back, and they took the cash back and they handed it to the teller at the register and said, "Here, the person behind me, I'm paying for their groceries." And this put my friend in tears because she barely could make rent that month, and that basically enabled her to pay rent. And she was so grateful, and it was an amazing act of kindness, and it was super rare in this world. And
Yeah,
basically it was just like, here's the grocery money, give any of the change left over to her, take it, have a nice day, and just walked away. Didn't stop and ask for a picture or to post it on Instagram, or wasn't going for clouts, just
yeah.
doing a nice thing. And and the person who this happened to is the one that's telling the story, and someone says, you know, well, that's pretty arrogant of them to assume that you couldn't pay for your groceries. I honestly feel like they should have just stayed in their own lane and minded their business. And I'm witnessing this, and I'm just like, I have to ask you something really personal. And they were like, what? I'm like, how many digits are in your bank account? And they were like, that's personal. I'm like, I'm not asking for how much money is in your bank account. I'm saying how many digits? 4, 5, 6, 7. How many digits? 6. What does it have to do with you? I'm like, because you don't remember what it's like to not be able to pay for groceries. That is exactly what is happening here. Is you don't remember a time where you had to wonder if you can afford to pay your rent or put it on a credit card so that you can buy milk. You don't remember what that's like. So it's an affront to you that someone would be nice to someone and pay for their bill. And so that is something that, for me, I've always kept in mind is, you know, you have to remember where you are, right? And where you're at in life. And I really had to kind of check that person. And I was a bit aggressive in jumping into that, but it was so maddening to me that, this person who had the kindness happen to them could have kept it under their sleeve, could have never mentioned it. Not having enough money to pay for groceries can be embarrassing in our society because we look down on people like that for some reason, because God forbid you fall in rough times. And it was like an affront. And I don't think that we should live in that world. Like Keanu Reeves said, I don't want to live in a world where kindness is considered weakness.
Absolutely. And I mean, we see this level of fragility all the time. It's like, I think one of I wish I could understand the psyche of folks who see someone express a need or see someone express a shortcoming of society, and the reaction, it's an aggressive reaction, is like, no, your lived experience is false because my lived experience
Right.
is different. And it comes out, it's so primal, like there's this sort of like defense of some, like this terrible denial of someone's lived experience. I don't know what they're taking from a story like that, and being like, this is, I don't know, this is breaking up who I am as a person or what my worldview should be. But it really does feel that way, that it's a threat response where they're like, no, that can't be right, or that person was an asshole because they assumed something about you, and
I mean, it's whatever it was, that person decided to be kind. But yeah, it was 100% that where they were just like, you should be mad because they assumed you couldn't pay your bill. Like it's like, well, you don't know what tell, or whether they were in tears, or their demeanor was just down and they were trying to do something nice. You don't know why the person did that, and it's you have to assume so many things to assume that someone is doing something for nefarious nature. Like, I can't imagine going through Starbucks and saying, "Hey, I'm going to pay for the car behind me," and handing it over, and then having someone be like, "I can't believe you just did that." Like, what? Why? Why?
How dare you, Steve?
Yeah.
How dare you assume my socioeconomic status because
it's the worst. And it's not,
well,
there's
crab pot problem, right? So
crab pot
someone's
problem,
someone's got to have an issue with what's going on, because maybe it's.
There's actually a saying that came out of the Black community, of "tell your truth," and I really love that so much. And the wisdom in that is so strong. And on the surface, it seems like a very, just like when the kids know, they'll be like, "Oh, that's true and real," which is, just okay, they mean the same thing, whatever, kid. But like, this is in this case, what came out of that statement of "your truth" is that you're telling the story that as you see it from your perspective. It's your truth. Is it the absolute truth? Well, maybe not, depending on the situation. Maybe there's somebody else who sees it a different way, and for them it's their truth. But your truth is that this is what happened and this is how the situation is. And so for her truth was that it was an amazingly kind and generous act of kindness, that this random person would do, and random acts of kindness are okay. Maybe there's some people out there who don't like random acts of kindness. I was waxing, as I do sometimes, inspirationally, I guess, talking about one of the big things for me was when I learned that there are just some people in this world. That kind of circles back to your original question of why does innovation take so long? There are just some people in this world who will not like you because you are selfless. If you do things that are positive and kind for the world, they automatically do not like you because it reminds them of how small minded they are. And so you are the enemy rather than them change, rather than them having introspection or any kind of self reflection. They blame you because if you weren't kind, then it wouldn't make them look bad. So it's your fault that they look bad because you could choose not to be kind and you're not. And so it took me until my 40s to realize that not everybody wants to be the best version of themselves. Not everybody wants to create good things and innovations and technology for the world. Some people don't like those kind of people, and it was a real shock to my system to learn that. I understand that it's a bit Pollyanna for those of you who are as old as I am. Like I get it, it's rose-colored glasses, thinking, oh, everybody gets along, and I guess it was, but I just never really thought until my 40s or really experienced that people could just not like kindness.
Some people get super insecure with these sorts of things, and we're both kind of mission oriented folks. I speaking for myself, it's like I mean, I don't care how much money I have in my life. I certainly would love to be fortunate enough to have everything I need to be comfortable.
Yep.
But like this idea of being a billionaire or
Yep.
being, or 100 millionaire or a million, like these things don't make sense to me. These aren't goals. Like the goal is, what did I do for this community and what did I do in this field of research and what did I do for these folks over here, because I'm mission oriented. And I've also experienced a very similar situation to you where, I'll meet these folks even within my institution who will just like bring a cage down on that. They're like, no, you can't do that because I don't see how I'm going to benefit from, concretely benefit from this good deed that you're doing. And, it's taken me, almost a better part of a decade to get to a place where my boss is actually mission oriented, and for the longest time I had bosses that, they could be nice, but they were also like, well, this is the institution and this is how you do it. And you climb the ladder and you follow the rules. And now I've got a boss who's like, you want to do this crazy thing? Go, do it faster, do it three. And I'm like, what about, the people above? Don't worry about them. You do the thing, And I found myself in a situation that I've never been in before where I'm like, are you sure you want me to? This is crazy for me, And he's like, go faster, which is amazing. But yeah, in my career, I've had these conversations where, people are like, what's the catch?
Yeah.
Like, where's the where are you making the money? And I'm like, no money. There's no money. We're just here to help. We're here to help. And what's interesting is, and what I keep trying to teach people who come from that mindset is actually every time you do something for no good reason, other than it needs to be done, other than there's a community that needs it, so like, let's go and do it. Every time without fail in my entire career that I've gone and done that, I've just addressed the hole, addressed the gap. It turns into something that someone can make profitable or disruptive or, exciting, or it'll get a lot of eyeballs. And so the institution looks good, or, whatever, thing that you want to turn into value in the value system that you live in, doing the thing to actually authentically help another human being actually provides value, but they miss all of those opportunities because they're like, the only way to make value is to charge people a lot of money for this service and make sure that you get paid a lot of money for the service. And I also cannot understand this mindset. It makes zero sense to me.
It doesn't make sense, but it doesn't work as well on institutions. But one of my favorite counters that I say to individuals now who either challenge my positive or kind demeanor as it's impossible, nobody's trying to be that nice or kind, or why do you do this, how can you not have an angle for yourself? And I go, oh, no, if I could put my hand up to in their face to stop them talking, I would. Like, no, listen, being charitable is the most selfish thing you can do in this world. What? You heard me. Being charitable is the most selfish thing you can do in this world, because by being charitable and doing good for the world, I get a euphoric feeling that you cannot pay money to get. There is nothing like doing something selflessly for someone else. So sometimes to be selfish, you got to be selfless. And that paradoxical statement just blows the mind of most people who don't understand kindness at all, because suddenly they start going, wait, is there actually intrinsic value in doing things for others? And you go, yeah, now you're getting it. Good, good. So you plant that little seed and you hope that it grows over the coming days and weeks and years. And make people realize that, you if you do stuff for others, maybe the karmatic, you put good into the universe and they'll come back to you isn't true. I don't know. I don't know whether karma exists or not. I like to think it does. But, even if it doesn't, I do believe that charitable acts are the most selfish thing in the good way that you can possibly do.
Amen. Well, I think, I don't want to take up too much of your time. You've given me too much already. And if we spend too much time in the week together, the world implodes, obviously. So, but if I could ask, right now for AbleGamers, like, what is your biggest, what's your biggest bottleneck? What is the thing we've got to solve for to get AbleGamers out? I mean, everything you do is so amazing, and everything you do, I've seen.
Pretty awesome. It's true. Yeah. Oh, you meant the company? Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Well, everyone involved is awesome, and I've seen firsthand, just the power of providing people with disabilities who are newly injured. I see it on the acute side. Newly injured, with this outlet that reminds them that their world may have changed with a new disability, but there's all of these new worlds that they can explore. It doesn't need to stop at one world, mainstream world. And I've seen how it builds community. I've seen how it's changed lives firsthand. So I want to get it out there. I want everyone to know that you guys are out there doing good works.
Appreciate that.
How can we solve problems? What are the biggest bottlenecks for you? Don't say money.
Money. The thing of it is for my charity, the true answer is money, but it's a little different than from a lot of the charities. And I have quite a few friends who are executive directors or charity runners, and I listen to their struggles and what they think. And every charity will tell you with more money they can do more good in the world, right? That's kind of of course you can. But right now, we still live in a world where disability is viewed as lesser. If you are disabled, you are automatically discounted as a lesser human. You are not of equal stature to others. No matter how smart, how witty, how funny, how charming, how sexy, it doesn't matter. If you're
Stop
disabled,
describing yourself and stop making this about you and just keep going.
That's all about me. If no matter how much you look like Hugh Jackman, as I do, that's round Hugh Jackman. That's what they call me. It's put that on my business card. You're automatically discounted, and unfortunately the same goes for a lot of the stigmas of video gaming. And although both of them are slowly going away as more people play games, and people who are gamers are getting older and into seats of power, and that helps move the paradigm. it's still those two things can coming together congruently of being disabled and fighting for disability rights in the video game space. It's hard because people can connect with the charity that helps cure sick children of cancer, and because it's a great and worthwhile endeavor, and we should fight to cure all the kids of all the cancers. No child should have to go through that. And no one in my situation is going to be like, yeah, whatever, kid, good luck. Like no one's going to do that. And it's a matter of saying, yes, there are charities that do that kind of thing, and they are important, but they are incredibly well funded. Whereas a charity like the one I work for has to continue fighting to prove that we're worthy of someone's dollar. And so I don't think there's anything that any one of us can do in particular. It's a matter of, speaking to your friends about how, being disabled goes beyond, do you have enough money to pay for medication? Of course, I get DMs all the time that says like, hey, I love what you do, but don't you think that it would be wiser to like help people with disabilities get jobs? And I'm like, but there are state programs that do that. There are other people that do that. There are very few people that do what we do at AbleGamers to help people enjoy their lives, to connect with other people. One of the things that, AbleGamers does really well, that I really can only describe by doing an anecdote is I went into a pediatric facility that was a full-time 24/7 care facility for special needs, as they call it. Although I hate that terminology, the special needs pediatric floor, where basically you were on a ventilator, and you had assisted breathing, or you weren't able to go more than a few hours without care. On this intensive care unit, I was on there to help one kid with a Make-A-Wish and make sure that they were able to play games. And when we went in there, I had nothing for his brother, who also lived in the same facility, who was dealing with the same condition and slightly differently, as we just talked about earlier, like all conditions not being exactly the same, still had challenges, but I wasn't there to help him, and I had nothing for them because I didn't have that in the budget. And so I rearranged the budget, and we went back and we helped the brother be able to play games. And one in a wheelchair on a ventilator, unable to speak, and the other in a wheelchair could speak, but was unable to communicate with his brother who couldn't speak because they couldn't really see eye to eye. So they would sit in a room together, not really communicating and watching Wheel of Fortune. And I was like, that's not interacting in a meaningful way. And that's going to be hard. We put them into a racing game together, and put them in, give them their controllers. They both finally fire up, and I start the game, and we start the race, and they both start coming around the curve and the track. In the very first 30 seconds of the game, the older brother rams his little brother's car off the road, and it explodes. That is just, if that is not human nature, the first interaction between two siblings, one destroyed the other one's car. Like
Yeah.
that is the connection piece that you're missing, and people don't appreciate that for what it is. They see it as, oh, you're playing video games. No, it was the first time that the older brother got to lovingly bully his younger brother, as brothers do to each other. And the kid dusted it off and rammed into the older brother's car, and they had a good time messing around with each other and completely ignoring the point of the racing game. And that is what AbleGamers does, is give those connection points back. And it doesn't feel like a high level thing to me, but I hope that over the coming years and decades, we begin to learn that the most heartbreaking part of disability is when it takes you out of the ability to connect with others on the way that you wish you could, and that video games are able to replicate some of those scenarios.
Wow, so well said. And yeah, I mean, we buried the lead till the end, but you really, I mean,
I'm very good at that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's such
a hard end of the podcast, or else you're not going to get the point of this whole thing.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, but it's such a hard. It's a hard thing to talk about, but it is the fact that society kind of has two modes with disability, which is either let's find a cure or let's pretend you don't exist.
Yeah.
And so the idea of a not-for-profit that wants to just be like, hey, what, like, let's do some leisure things. Like, you deserve, you should be allowed to engage with the community, and we should just be about connection and leisure and fun and engagement and things that are not circulating around daily survival or well, you know, I think daily survival ties into everything that you're doing, but doesn't necessarily directly circle around keeping you alive day to day or curing your illness. Yeah, I wish more people could could understand A, how crucial that is, and B, how so many folks with disability don't love their disability, but just wish that the world was curated in a way that, you know, I know that the disability pride conversation, as everything that we've spoken about, comes down to an individual, you know, speaking of your truth. But also I think that, you know, there's a lot of folks with disability who are just like, you know, I don't need a cure. I just need I just need to be able to interact with the world the way everyone else can.
And I think for me, one of my final thoughts on that for this podcast is we don't value mental health in a way that I think any of us should. One of the things, I think the reason why AbleGamers struggles to get funding from government sources and whatnot is because mental health is still not completely understood or accepted by our society. You're starting to see it. It's definitely creeping in more than it was a decade ago, but there's still some holdouts who think that it's all rubbish. But yet, the people who think it's rubbish will also be the first ones to mention the Harvard studies that have shown that men are disproportionately likely to die of heart problems brought on by depression because we are less likely to have friends to lean on than women of the similar age group and race, because for whatever reason, men are taught to hide our feelings and to not talk about disability and depression and things that make us sad. So they'll be the first ones to point that fact out. But then when you talk about mental health, they'll be like, it's not important. But it is important. And so if I can connect someone, you know, to a family member, a loved one, a potential romantic interest, or just a platonic best friend, you know, and that helps defeat that depression, that helps destroy that social isolation, then we've done our job. We've helped extend their life a little bit and made their existence on this planet where they enjoy it a little bit more. I can't find any fault in any of that.
Nope, neither can I. Well, Steve, thank you so much. You've spent way too much time with me, and I appreciate it. This is such an important conversation. So thanks for coming, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you, sir. Good to see you. Bye, everybody.